falling thanks to weak jobs data and renewed fears of recession in the US. The World Bank has some advice for India. In the US and the Philippines, they've caught 2 women who were spying for China. It's a story you don't want to miss. India's neighbor Nepal is stoking the border row with new banknotes that will show Indian territory. In North Korea, Kim Jong-un has executed 30 officials for the recent flood disaster. In France, a rape case has shocked the country. A woman was drugged and raped by her husband and 72 other men for 10 years. In Venezuela, President Maduro has declared an early Christmas. It's next month. We'll explain. In Eswatini, the king is taking his 16th wife, some 3 decades his junior. It's all kinds of problematic. And from AI in homework to smartphone bans, how schools the world over are grappling with technology. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi arrives in Ankara. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan receives him at the airport. In February, Erdogan had visited Cairo. Both countries are looking to mend ties after a decade of frosty relations. Row erupts over Hungary's new visa rules for Russians. Critics say it increases the risk of spying in the European Union. Budapest dismisses the fears as, and I'm quoting, political hysteria. Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Since then, Hungary is the only EU country to have maintained close ties with Vladimir Putin. In India, Rahul Gandhi kicks off the Congress's campaign in Jammu and Kashmir, says his party will restore the region's statehood after coming to power. Jammu and Kashmir will hold assembly polls in 3 phases. The first phase is on the 18th of September. The results will be declared on 8th October. At least 81 people killed in Nigeria in a suspected attack by Boko Haram. The incident took place in the northeastern part of the country on Sunday. The Boko Haram insurgency began in 2009. The fighting has killed thousands of people and displaced more than 2 million. Thailand's new Prime Minister names her cabinet, dumps an influential military-linked party from the government. This has happened for the first time since 2019. Last month, Paetongtarn Shinawatra became Thailand's youngest ever Prime Minister. And you may soon have to pay to visit the Trevi Fountain in Rome. Authorities are mulling introducing a ticketing system to the iconic site. More than 1,000 people visit the landmark every hour. This is the latest attempt by Italy to tackle over-tourism.
На даний час під нашим контролем знаходиться
першу міжурядову угоду про таке співробітництво.
Морального аргументу.
Пан президент України Верховний Головнокомандувач Сил України, Сили оборони України.
It's a major shake-up in Ukraine, the biggest since the war broke out. President Volodymyr Zelensky is reshaping his core team. Some familiar faces are out and new ones are in. The plan is to replace more than half of the cabinet. And what a time to do it. Just as Russia unleashed a massive missile attack. But what exactly is Zelensky hoping to achieve here? Who has he fired and why now? So far, 7 ministers have resigned. 1 presidential aide was also fired. This includes Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. Chances are you're familiar with this man. Kuleba has been Zelensky's trusted diplomatic messenger. He's traveled to Europe, to North America, to Latin America, to Africa, even to India and China. His job was to drum up support for Ukraine. Well, not anymore. Kuleba announced his resignation today. So did the Justice Minister, the Environment Minister, the Strategic Industries Minister and 2 Deputy Prime Ministers. Although it's not game over for all of them, chances are they will get different portfolios. And Zelensky has not really explained why he's doing this. He just gave a vague justification on Tuesday. Listen to what he said.
Autumn will be extremely important for Ukraine. Our state institutions must be organized in a way that ensures Ukraine achieves all the results we need, all of us. To this end, we must strengthen certain areas within the government, and personnel decisions have been prepared. I also anticipate a different emphasis on certain areas of our foreign and domestic policy.
So 50% of the cabinet was replaced, and Zelensky's justification is that the season is changing. What does autumn have to do with politics? Well, after autumn comes winter, and Russia is looking to capitalize on that. They are targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure. No energy, no heating. No heating, no morale. That is what Russia is betting on. So yes, Ukraine does need to prepare for the winter, but it's not clear how a cabinet reshuffle will help. Not like ministers are laying gas pipelines. So clearly there is more at play, possibly domestic politics. You see, Zelensky's core team has been running a tight ship. They have an iron grip over affairs, whether it's foreign policy or military strategy. If you disagree with them, you're out. Consider what happened to the last army chief. He said the war had reached a stalemate, and weeks later he was replaced. The problem here is a lack of accountability. Zelensky has declared martial law in Ukraine, so democracy has basically been paused. The parliamentary elections were supposed to be held last year. The presidential polls were scheduled for this year, but both were postponed. So Zelensky and his party still control everything in Ukraine, which is quite different from other wartime regimes. Just look at Israel. When war broke out, they formed a unity government. Basically, the opposition joined the cabinet during wars. But Zelensky has not done that. He has accumulated power in his office. Some opposition lawmakers have criticized this. They've been calling for a unity government in Kyiv. They say this is a government without ministers. Some US senators have also chimed in. They want Zelensky to hold elections amid the war. Maybe that is why he's shuffling his cabinet. It's not an election, but it is a symbolic change. And the timing is also important. Zelensky is heading to the US later this month. He will present what he calls a victory plan to the US president, Joe Biden. So he'll need a new team by then. But a bigger challenge is the Russian onslaught. Today, Moscow unleashed another attack. The target was the city of Lviv. Reports say 13 missiles and 29 drones were fired today. Some of them hit civilian infrastructure. City officials claimed 7 people were killed in the attack. Among them were 3 children. Lviv is in western Ukraine. It's also close to the Polish border, so Poland scrambled fighter jets to ward off any threat. An even bigger attack happened yesterday. Russia fired 2 ballistic missiles at Poltava. It's a city in central Ukraine. One of them hit a military academy in the city. The other crashed into a hospital. Kyiv says more than 50 people, 50 people have been killed, plus more than 200 others have been injured. It's one of the deadliest attacks since the war began. These attacks are putting pressure on Kyiv. Zelensky is pleading for air defense systems from allies, basically weapons to shoot down Russian missiles. Meanwhile, Moscow is pushing on. Today, they announced a major decision. Russia is tweaking its nuclear doctrine. And this is very important. A nuclear doctrine tells you when a country will use nuclear weapons, under what circumstances. Russia's current doctrine was set in the year 2020. It has 2 main conditions, either a nuclear attack on Russia or a conventional attack that threatens Russia's existence. These are the 2 scenarios when Russia will use nukes. Both are quite unrealistic. But Moscow is now tweaking that doctrine. They're blaming the West for this change in policy. So things are suddenly speeding up in Ukraine, both on the battlefield and diplomatically. Zelensky and his team have been quite rigid about how to handle this war. Let's see if the new team is any different. That's the welcome that Prime Minister Modi got in Singapore. His trip to Southeast Asia is generating interest. Before Singapore, he was in Brunei, where he made a significant statement.
भारत की एक्ट ईस्ट पॉलिसी और इंडो पैसिफिक विजन में ब्रुनेई का महत्वपूर्ण साझेदार रहा है। हम सहमत हैं कि इस क्षेत्र में कोड ऑफ कंडक्ट पर सहमति बने। हम विस्तारवाद नहीं, विकासवाद की नीति का समर्थन करते हैं।
Development, not expansionism. That is the message from Prime Minister Modi. Development, not expansionism. Obviously, it was directed at China, whose core philosophy of late has been expansionism. China has been making aggressive moves against its neighbors, indulging in gunboat diplomacy. Chinese ships keep ramming into Filipino vessels. Chinese Coast Guard keeps making threats. Beijing has deployed more than 200 ships near the Philippines. Manila detected these ships in the past week. They were spotted inside its exclusive economic zone. So the situation is grave and tense, and Brunei and India have been keeping track of it. Prime Minister Modi met the Sultan of Brunei today. His name is Haji Hassan Al Bolkiah. After the meeting, they issued a joint statement. The statement does not name China, but it clearly delivers a message to the Chinese regime. The statement calls for maritime safety and security. It demands freedom of navigation and overflight, and it supports unimpeded lawful commerce. All of these are significant points, but here is the most important part. Let me read it out for you. The leaders also urged all parties to resolve disputes through peaceful means in accordance with international law. This is about the South China Sea and Beijing's claims on the region. We've been telling you about this on the show. Beijing claims almost the entire South China Sea, even areas that belong to other countries. China says they're all theirs. So there are 6 claimants in all: Vietnam, the Philippines, Taiwan, Malaysia, Brunei, and China. As you can tell, 5 of these are smaller players. The 6th one, that is China, tries to browbeat all of them with bogus claims. China's claims are in clear violation of international law. Brunei and the other stakeholders have been saying as much. And now India has formally endorsed this position. This is a shift. In the past, India has been hesitant to take a stand on disputes in this region. But now it is clearly calling out Chinese expansionism in the South China Sea, and this shift goes beyond issuing statements. It involves action as well. India is providing diplomatic and material support to China's adversaries. During Prime Minister Modi's visit, Brunei and India upgraded their relationship. India now considers Brunei a key partner for its Act East policy. Both countries agreed to form what they're calling an enhanced partnership. What is an enhanced partnership? It basically means that both sides will become close collaborators. Beyond bilateral trade deals, they will work together on defense. They plan to step up maritime cooperation. Their militaries will exchange visits. They will also conduct training programs and joint exercises. Another major focus area is space. An agreement was renewed today. Brunei hosts a station for ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO. It has a space station in Brunei. It is used to track satellites and launch vehicles. Brunei will continue to host this facility. The existing pact was renewed today. There are also plans to start direct flights from India to Brunei. So overall, India is investing in this relationship in particular and in South Asia in general. It is a strategic imperative for 2 key reasons. First, it keeps rivals in China, like China, in check. It keeps the rivals in check, for example, China. And second, to fulfill India's own development needs. Which brings us to Singapore, the second stop for the Indian leader and an important regional partner for New Delhi. Singapore is India's 6th biggest trading partner and its largest source for foreign direct investments. In the last 24 years, investments worth $160 billion, $160 billion have flowed from Singapore to India. And these numbers are expected to grow in the coming years. India and Singapore want to elevate their ties. Before Prime Minister Modi's visit, Singapore had hosted a round table. India had sent 4 ministers to attend it. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, Railways Minister Ashwini Vaishnav and Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal. During these talks, both sides identified new areas of cooperation. And semiconductors was one of them. Singapore is an important hub for semiconductors. 10% of the world's chips are produced there. It also makes 20% of all chip-making equipment. Now, reports say India is looking to sign a pact with Singapore to expand cooperation in the semiconductor space. Food security, renewables and green hydrogen are some of the other promising areas. The talks are scheduled for tomorrow. We'll be tracking all of it for you. Here in India, the stock market fell today. You may ask, what's so special about that? Markets keep rising and falling. Well, this fall came after a streak of rises, 14 days to be precise. The Nifty made gains for 14 consecutive days. It rose by more than 1,000 points in that time. But today, the rally came to an end. Not by much, though. The Nifty closed 81 points down. The Sensex closed around 200 points down. So let's tackle the obvious question. What led to the correction? Mainly global sentiment. In the US, Nasdaq fell by more than 3% on Tuesday. Dow Jones dropped 1.5%. So Indian markets are tracking the US markets, sort of like mirroring the sentiment. And in the US, the sentiment is bad. There is talk of recession once again. Most experts are pointing to two warnings. The first is the jobs report. In the month of July, America's unemployment rate increased to 4.3%, which is the highest since 2021. Also, the fourth consecutive month of rising joblessness. This usually means trouble. That's the first warning. The second warning is the Treasury yield. The US Treasury issues short-term and long-term bonds. When you buy a bond, you're essentially loaning money to the government. And the government promises you a predetermined interest rate. Normally, the long-term bonds pay better, much like your bank deposits. A long-term deposit gives you more interest than a short-term one. But right now, the opposite is happening. The short-term bond is giving more returns. What does this mean? It means that investors are bracing for a recession. Their economic outlook is not positive, so they're making short-term investments. American bank JP Morgan agrees with this assessment. They think that a recession is very much a possibility, that there is a 35% chance of US recession by the end of this year. And if the US crashes, all of us crash. That's how the global economy is poised at the moment. So is there a way to avoid it? Well, the Federal Reserve is planning a rate cut, their first rate cut in almost 4 years. The hope is that it will kickstart the economy. When interest rates are cut, loans become cheaper, so spending increases, and a recession may be averted. Or so they hope. But coming back to the markets, there is one more factor dragging the markets down: the chip slowdown. Just look at what's happening to Nvidia. Their shares plunged 9.5% on Tuesday. Imagine that, 9.5% down in one trading day. Around $280 billion was wiped out from its market capitalization. $280 billion in a single day. It was the biggest single day loss for a US company. You can blame overvaluation for it. Yes, Nvidia has seen impressive growth, but even that doesn't justify the share prices. Nvidia is up 124% this year. Investors are going crazy about it, but the company is struggling to keep up. You see, their fortunes are linked to artificial intelligence, and the jury is still out on that. AI is consuming a lot of money, but it's not really making profits for anyone, not yet. Most of the big AI firms are running losses. Even Intel dropped on Tuesday by 9%. So the future of AI is uncertain. Now, I know all of this sounds depressing. The US is facing recession, Russia and Israel are fighting wars, China is clashing with its neighbors, and the so-called AI revolution is not paying off. How does a country like India navigate this situation? Maybe by playing to its strengths. The World Bank has some ideas. It is asking India to focus on trade-driven growth, basically to export more things. India is already a leading exporter of IT services and medicines, but the World Bank says diversify. Focus on labor-intensive exports as well, like apparel, leather, textiles, footwear. I'll tell you what the logic is. China used to dominate labor-intensive products, but recently they have upgraded. Beijing is grappling with an aging population, so they're shifting away from labor-intensive production. And who is stepping in? mostly Bangladesh and Vietnam. The World Bank says that India should also join in. But frankly, it's a question of priority. The government has set aside incentives for these sectors. For example, 6,000 crore rupees for footwear and leather, 10,000 crores for textiles and apparels. So the push is already being made. Guess we'll have to wait for the results. Even in normal times, this would be a challenging task. But amid the current global turmoil, it's proving to be even harder. We've been reporting on women's safety for some time now on cases of rape, sexual exploitation, harassment and abuse. All of it is disturbing and unsettling. But then there are some cases that just send shivers down your spine, that make you stop in your tracks. Tonight we'll tell you about one such case. It is from France. At the center of it is one man, Dmytro Kuleba. He's 71 years old. For over a decade, he drugged his wife. Her name is Giselle. He drugged and then raped her. And not just that, he invited 72 other men to also rape her. Giselle did not protest or complain. Do you know why? Because she had no idea that this was happening to her. She was so heavily sedated that she was unaware of what was being done to her for 10 whole years. It's hard to even imagine it, let alone living this nightmare. The case is now in court. The husband and 50 other men are on trial. All hearings will be public. More horrendous details are expected to be revealed. The abuse is said to have begun in 2011. The couple lived in Mazan in southeastern France. Every evening, Dominique would crush sleeping pills and anxiety medication. He would mix this in Giselle's food. That put her into a deep sleep. Experts have compared it to a state of coma. Then he raped her, and then he went online to a chat room where he invited other men to rape and sexually abuse his wife. These men came from all walks of life: truck drivers, soldiers, a journalist, a nurse, a prison guard, an IT expert working at a bank. They were between 26 to 74 years of age. Most of them were either married or in a relationship. Some even had children. Most of these men raped her once, but some kept coming back, raping her as many as 6 times. The police says she was raped at least 92 times by 72 men. And her husband, Dominique, filmed all of these acts. He had very strict rules for these men, apparently, to make sure that his wife remained unconscious throughout. The men were asked to park away from the house, to undress in the kitchen. They were banned from smoking. They could not wear a cologne. They were asked to have neat fingernails. They were asked to warm their hands. He made them run their hands under hot water so that the touch wouldn't wake her up. And all of this, through this period, Giselle lost weight. She lost her hair. She was forgetting days. The family thought it was Alzheimer's. Her husband told her it could be tiredness. Of course, she believed him. They'd been together since she was 18. They had 3 children. Giselle believed her husband could do no wrong. But all of it changed in 2020. One day she was summoned to the police station. Dominique had been arrested. He was at a grocery store where he tried filming up the skirts of 3 women. They reported him to the police. The police seized his cell phones, cameras and other devices, and on them they found 300 photographs of Giselle. She was unconscious in the photos. The police also discovered chats. They began an investigation, through the course of which they found 20,000 videos and photographs. 20,000 videos and photographs. Most of them were labeled. They were kept in an electronic folder called Abuse. Giselle had no clue. She had no memory of being raped or abused. The family was in for a shock. In fact, Dominique had not just filmed his wife. He kept nude photos of his daughter as well. When these details came out, he admitted to his crimes. So did the other accused. Most of these people said that they thought it was happening with her knowledge. More than 72 men. 50 of them have been identified so far. They're all going on trial. If found guilty, Dominique faces up to 20 years in prison. And what about Giselle? Well, she has divorced him and she wants a public trial. She wants all the details out in the open.
This is also a way for her to say that one can overcome this challenge, even though it's just the beginning today, that this has to be made known, and that shame should switch sides.
The case has shocked France. It's more than a criminal trial. It's a shameful commentary on the society. This is a country that touts its progressive values. It says it defends women's rights. Yet women are not safe in the most intimate of spaces. They aren't safe in their homes. And this is not a one-off case. Multiple French surveys have shown that most of the abuse happens at home. Most of the victims are women. A lot of them are either drugged or suffer blackouts. Of course, the larger problem is not unique to France. Women are not safe in public places. They're not safe in workplaces. They're not even safe at home. It is a chilling realization. Abuse is not confined to dark alleys or public spaces. It permeates even the walls of our homes. This case may test the collective conscience of France, but it's also a painful reminder that women's safety is constantly under threat. This horrific crime may be one of the most extreme examples, but it's very much part of the broader problem. Nowhere is truly safe for women, often not even their homes.
To save the lives of hostages, ultimately agreed to release those 3 militants. Former External Affairs Minister Jaswant Singh, in fact, had personally escorted the terrorists to Kandahar, a move that still remains, to date, the most controversial. So what is the IC-814 row all about? It's a series that has been released on Netflix and it's based on the real-life hijacking in 1999. And this series chronicles the horrific experience of the passengers and the crew members and the challenges that they faced by the government as their flight was diverted to multiple locations before finally ending up in Taliban-controlled Kandahar in Afghanistan. The hijackers in this series are depicted with the code names Chief, Doctor, Burger, Bhola and Shankar. However, it's the use of the names Bhola and Shankar that hasn't really gone down well with the viewers, which has now triggered this massive controversy. In fact, they contend that the show should have highlighted the fact that the hijackers were 5 Muslim terrorists and 2 of them in fact had used Hindu aliases. Netizens have accused the filmmaker Anubhav Sinha of deliberately distorting facts and has even labelled his work as propaganda. Now, several top BJP leaders have also raised objections and questions to the portrayal of events in this series. BJP IT cell chief Amit Malviya has said that the hijackers were dreaded terrorists who acquired aliases to hide their Muslim identities. He in fact posted on the social media platform X saying, and I quote, "Filmmaker Anubhav Sinha legitimized their criminal intent by furthering their non-Muslim names." Decades later,
Our next story is about 2 women from 2 different corners of the world, but both accused of the exact same thing, spying for China. The first suspect is called Linda Sun, 41 years old, a Chinese-born naturalized citizen of the US. She was the deputy chief of staff to the governor of New York. She worked for the US government for 14 years, rose through the ranks and made her way to the top levels of the New York state government. But in July, her house was raided by the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And yesterday she was detained along with her husband. Both have been accused of working for Beijing and the Chinese Communist Party. Sun is said to have removed official criticism of China on Xinjiang. It's a province in China, home to the Uyghur Muslim people. China persecutes these people. It has put more than 1 million of them in jails. Sun used to scrub mentions of the Uyghurs. Then there was the Wuhan virus pandemic. Even as New York was under lockdown, Sun ensured that Chinese consular officials had access to New York leaders. She's even accused of adding Chinese officials to private New York government calls. And then there was Taiwan. She declined meetings with Taiwanese dignitaries. She blocked invitations to the governor and then went on to protest against the Taiwanese delegation. Basically, all her moves were meant to benefit Beijing. And she got away with this for years. What was her reward? Beijing apparently showered her with riches, helped her buy luxury mansions, like her $4.1 million New York house, the one that was raided, and an ocean view condominium in Hawaii worth $2.1 million. Then there were sports cars like a 2024 Ferrari Roma. These were rewards for a job well done. But perhaps the most striking rewards were the gourmet ducks. That's right, ducks. Nanjing-style salted ducks made by a Chinese consular official's private chef. They were sent every few months to Sun's parents' house. Those duck deliveries are also part of the investigation. Sun and her husband were produced before a Brooklyn court yesterday. They've been charged with secretly acting as Chinese agents. They pleaded not guilty.
I think that these charges are disappointing, that they are the product of an overly aggressive investigation.
Pardon me. Excuse me.
And we are looking forward to exercising our right to a speedy trial and addressing these accusations in the forum where it's most appropriate, which is a court of law. Thank you.
Sun's lawyer says that this is an overly aggressive investigation. The trial will resume later this month. So that was the tale of Linda Sun, our first alleged Chinese spy. The second story is even more outlandish. It's about Alice Guo.
On or about 1 o'clock a.m., 4 September, Alice Guo, also known as Guo Huaping, was arrested in Tangerang City, Jakarta, Indonesia. I congratulate all law enforcement personnel who made this apprehension possible.
This was the president of the Philippines. He thanked police officials in Indonesia for capturing a wanted fugitive. Her name is Alice Guo. She's another suspected Chinese spy. In 2022, she became the mayor of a small town in the Philippines, a town called Bamban. After that, there were reports of illegal scam centers. Both locals and foreign nationals were abducted and held at these centers, at these locations. They were forced to scam people online. Earlier this year, this town was raided. The investigations revealed Guo's link to the scam centers. Reports say that these centers were built on land that she partially owned. This caused an uproar. Alice Guo was questioned by the country's Senate. That's when discrepancies started to show up. Guo's birth certificate was registered when she was 17 years old. She only registered to vote in Bamban town in 2021, just a year before she was elected mayor. She could not tell the Senate where she grew up. She said she did not remember. This raised a lot of eyebrows. The Philippines accused her of being a Chinese spy. They said her fingerprints matched those of another individual, a Chinese national named Guo Huaping. So in the month of July, the Senate ordered her arrest, but by then she had fled the country. She made her way to Indonesia and then onwards to Malaysia and Singapore. It's been a few months, but Alice Guo has finally been caught in Indonesia. She will be extradited to the Philippines. So hopefully we'll find out the truth about her identity soon enough. Now, you've heard both the stories, the tales of Linda Sun and Alice Guo. They've captured the public imagination. They may even be convicted. But let's face it, they probably weren't the best agents out there. China most likely has a number of spies all over the world, silently pushing Beijing's agenda. All we can do is ensure thorough background checks and maybe keep an eye on dubious duck deliveries. Now let's talk about Nepal, one of India's neighbors, a landlocked country in the Himalayas, home to about 30 million people. Actually, it's a bit less than that. For the last few years, Nepal's population has been shrinking because of migration. Tens of thousands of young people leave Nepal every year. Why? Well, take your pick. A stagnating economy, a lack of job opportunities, and absolutely no political stability. This country has never seen a prime minister complete a full term, never ever. Nepal became a federal republic in the year 2008, and since then, their prime ministers barely finish 1 year in office. Between 2015 and now, there have been 7 different premierships, 7 in 9 years. But it's not that Nepal gets to see new faces either. It's the same 3 men who keep rotating the PM's chair. These 3, Sher Bahadur Deuba, Pushp Kamal Dahel, also known as Prachand, and KP Sharma Oli. 2 of the 3 will ally with each other and they will pull down the third one, passing the prime ministership among themselves. So Nepali politics is chaotic, to say the least. And amid this internal chaos, Nepal wants to provoke external tensions as well. There's a report doing the rounds about Nepal's grand plan to revitalize its money, not the economy, no, their money. Nepal is preparing a new set of banknotes. They will feature a new edition. The map on these new notes will be augmented with some Indian territory. That is right. Amid this never-ending political turmoil, Nepal wants to pick a fight with its neighbor. This dispute began a few years ago under KP Sharma Oli. He was Prime Minister between 2018 and 2021, and he's Prime Minister again now because of Nepal's political merry-go-round. Anyway, in 2020, Oli's government had approved a new map of the country. It included 3 disputed areas, Limpi Adura, Lipu Lake and Kala Pani. 3 disputed areas. These areas have been governed by India for decades, but Nepal has had a claim to these regions too. Now, both sides have had many rounds of talks about this. The talks were slow, but they were mutually respectful. In 2020, however, KP Sharma Oli decided to upend that system. He proposed the new map, proceeded with some chest thumping and hoped that painting India as an aggressor would unite Nepal behind him. This ploy almost worked. He did last almost 1 whole year after that. He became Nepal's longest-serving prime minister in the modern era, serving a grand total of 3 years and 88 days at a stretch. But that's still not a complete term. So Oli tanked Indo-Nepal relations for peanuts. And those relations haven't recovered yet, because Oli's new map is a ticking time bomb. No other prime minister would repeal it. They did not want to look weak. Instead, they doubled down. Prachand was Nepal's prime minister till the month of July this year. A few months before his ouster, he approved new banknotes. Notes featuring Nepal's new map, including the disputed territory. Now, why would Prachand do that? Perhaps he knew that the merry-go-round was about to start again and he wanted to stay in power a little longer. Maybe he thought bringing up the dispute would give him a few more months. Well, it did not work. Prachand got the boot. Oli has returned, but the new banknotes are still in production. They will be ready soon, in a few months. By then, Nepal's next prime minister will probably start distributing them, continuing their game of one-upmanship. It may work for these politicians, but it hasn't worked for Nepal. It hasn't worked for Indo-Nepal ties and for the region's growth and prosperity. So maybe instead of childish power games, Nepal's politicians should focus on actually governing. Now to North Korea. Kim Jong-un continues to keep the Korean peninsula on the edge. He has ramped up missile and weapons testing. Kim wants to keep the threat of a nuclear conflict alive. And back home, he's been cracking down on his officials. Last month, devastating floods killed thousands of people in North Korea. They were caused by record-breaking rainfall and possibly triggered by climate change. But Kim Jong-un is blaming his officials for these floods. In fact, he's held 30 of them responsible for the disaster, and he executed all of them. Our next report tells you more.
It's a story straight out of The Dictator. In July, North Korea was hit by massive floods on its western borders. Record-breaking rainfall caused widespread devastation. Large swaths of farmlands, entire roads, railway lines, and over 4,000 homes were submerged, and thousands were killed. Kim Jong-un had personally inspected the flooded regions. And then the North Korean dictator held 30 officials responsible for the floods. A report from the South Korean media claims they were all executed last month. Public executions are not rare in North Korea. Last year, there were at least 100 of them. In other countries, capital punishment is reserved for only the most serious crimes. However, in North Korea, death sentences are handed down like parking tickets. In 2022, a 22-year-old was executed. What was his crime? His love for South Korean entertainment. He was caught distributing South Korean film and music. They are banned in North Korea. Pyongyang labels it as reactionary ideology and culture. So what else falls under the same category? White dresses, grooms carrying the bride, wearing sunglasses, drinking alcohol from wine glasses. All these practices are fairly common in South Korean culture, but in the north, they can get you killed. Fashion trends like skinny jeans, certain hairstyles, even dyed or long hair are punishable by death in North Korea. The death penalty is a tool for Kim and his family to enforce loyalty to the regime. Fear is used to strengthen Kim's grip on North Korea. Last year, 9 people were executed. They were caught smuggling beef. The regime decided to make an example out of them. The execution was carried out in public, and 25,000 locals were forced to witness it in person. The regime made it mandatory for the locals to attend. They typically shut down factories, farms and marketplaces for executions. Residents living near the site of the execution who are between the ages of 17 and 60 and can walk are ordered to come for the execution. This is not new for North Korea. Kim Jong-un's father and grandfather also used these tactics when they were in power. Kim is simply extending the scope of the death penalty. Now, even climate change can get you executed in the Hermit Kingdom.
Our next story is about a marriage between King Maswati III and Nomsibo Zuma. Maswati is the king of Eswatini. Nomsibo is the daughter of Jacob Zuma, former president of South Africa. On paper, it sounds like a political union, two powerful families coming together, but in reality, it's absurd and ridiculous. King Maswati is 56 years old. Nomsibo Zuma is 21. What's worse, she will be his 16th wife, 16th. And she had to dance bare-chested in front of the king to be selected. In case you're wondering, we're still in 2024. Maybe time works differently in the kingdom of Eswatini. This is the country we're talking about. Look where it is located, in southern Africa, sandwiched between South Africa and Mozambique. Eswatini is a small kingdom. It has over 1 million people. Until 2018, Eswatini was known as Swaziland. The name has now changed, but everything else remains the same. Eswatini is one of the world's last remaining absolute monarchies, ruled by this man, King Maswati III. He succeeded his father. He was crowned in 1986 at the age of 18. He has total control of the government. Eswatini does have a parliament, but the king wields all the power and he's quite controversial. King Maswati has an opulent lifestyle. From palaces to private jets, he owns all of it, while the rest of the population lives in poverty. And polygamy is part of the Swazi culture. So the king has 15 wives. He chooses them at the annual Reed Dance, which is a day-long ceremony where young women perform before the royal family, bare-chested, wearing traditional clothes, singing and dancing, and the king chooses his bride from this mix. This is how he chose Nomsibo Zuma, his 16th wife. Eswatini calls it culture and tradition, but it's quite controversial. 40% of the kingdom's population is HIV positive. In 2001, the king started a fight against AIDS. In 2005, he enforced a ban, no copulation with girls below the age of 18. But just days later, the king himself broke the law. He took a 17-year-old girl as his 9th wife. People were enraged. So the king decided to punish himself. Do you know what was the punishment? He gave up one cow. Some great sacrifice and justice there. And it's not the only such case. In 2003, he got a new bride, but the mother of the bride said that she'd been kidnapped. Basically, what Eswatini calls culture is a grotesque power dynamic. I mean, look at it. A king in his late 50s selecting from a group of dancing women. What about the woman's agency? Why is she reduced into a spectacle for royal entertainment? This is a king who blends cultural rituals for personal indulgence. His kingdom does not have basic needs, proper health care or education, but he's busy accumulating wives and wealth. The reed dance used to be a cultural rite, marking a girl's transition to womanhood, but now it's a symbol of royal privilege, where women are commodified and their future hangs in the balance of one man's whims. And once they become his brides, their life is dictated by the palace. No freedom, no escape from this cruel cycle. All of this has to change. We are not saying that tradition is not important, it is. But using it to expand a harem of wives is not tradition, it is a shameless expression of power. King Maswati III must confront this reality. Tradition cannot justify exploitation, and tradition too must be in tune with the times. The fact that women still have to parade themselves in front of a king is not only unthinkable, it's a shame on a world that claims that it is moving forward. Now let's shift our attention to Venezuela, where Christmas will begin next month. Why? Because President Nicolas Maduro says so. But not everyone is eager to start singing carols. Venezuela has just witnessed a disputed presidential election. There's severe political turmoil, violent crackdowns, economic issues, global outcry, possibly more sanctions. Amid all of this, their president wants Christmas in October. An early Christmas to lift spirits. It is doing anything but. This fake cheer is only adding to people's anger. Our next report tells you more.
Picture this. You're the leader of a nation in crisis. There's political turmoil, rampant corruption, skyrocketing inflation, economic mismanagement, and severe food insecurity. Given the circumstances, what would you do? Well, it doesn't matter what your answer is, as long as you don't take a leaf out of the Nicolas Maduro playbook. The president of crisis-stricken Venezuela has had what seems to be an absurd eureka moment. Maduro has chosen delusion over solution. He has declared an early Christmas. We aren't kidding.
In homage to you, in gratitude to you, I am going to decree an early Christmas for October 1st. Christmas begins on October 1st for everyone. Christmas has arrived with peace, happiness, and security.
Albeit one distinctively lacking in Christmas cheer. This is not Maduro's first sleigh ride, but it is the earliest. Newsflash. Despite his late-stage capitalist strategy of making up holidays, no one seems to be buying Maduro's jollity, because he's still cracking down on Venezuelans. The country held its presidential election in July this year, and Maduro claimed victory, without providing proof. Evidence suggests that Maduro didn't win at all. In fact, he may have lost the election badly to his opposition rival, Edmundo Gonzalez, against whom the government conveniently issued an arrest warrant earlier this week.
This cowardly man Gonzalez endorses the violence we are suffering. This cowardly man has the nerve to say he doesn't recognize Venezuelan government institutions.
Maduro has also ordered the opening of 2 new prisons. Why? To accommodate detained protesters. Since the elections, protests have taken over Venezuela's streets, and they've been fiercely repressed. Maduro has openly called for everyone in the streets to be imprisoned. So far, at least 2,400 people have been arrested. At least 20 people have died. Many have fled the country, and many others are still hiding in their homes. And it's not just about the anger at home. There's a global outcry over what's going on in the country, especially from the US. They've announced sanctions against 15 senior administration members of the Maduro regime. This reportedly includes the foreign minister, the Supreme Court president, and a top member of the Electoral Council. Let alone sanctions, the US is hitting Maduro where it hurts. They have seized his plane, claiming it was bought illegally. Maduro has ruled Venezuela for 11 years now. Currently, he's facing his toughest political challenge, and Venezuela, its most violent authoritarian crackdown under Maduro's rule. So while Maduro seems hell-bent to whip up some Christmas cheer, ordinary Venezuelans would prefer an early Christmas gift instead, return of law and order, and some much-needed peace.
Technology is humanity's biggest win, but also its strangest battle. We are witnessing this in schools everywhere. Technology has transformed education, for the better, yes, but also for the worse. Teachers are competing with screens for attention. Policymakers are pressing students to stop watching TikTok. Researchers are saying that social media harms mental health, and parents are worried about all of this and more. But to what end? Schools still have a tech problem. So here's what governments are doing. They're going for the low-hanging fruit. Smartphone bans in schools. Nearly 1 in 4 countries ban smartphones in schools the world over. 1 in 4 countries. It's a growing trend, but there is no uniformity in the approach. Some countries have strict laws, others have loose policy recommendations. In some cases, bans are enforced at the national level. Hungary, Greece, France and Belgium did this just this month. In other cases, there are state-level policies, like in India and the US. Then there are other variations, like target age groups, time spans and exemptions. Basically, everyone wants to ban smartphones in schools, but there's no set template or winning formula. No one knows how to do it effectively. They don't even know if smartphone bans really work. There is little evidence to support them. The research is limited because this is a new and complex issue. Yes, smartphones in schools have many downsides: reduced attention spans, mounting social pressure, cyberbullying, online sexual harassment, so on and so forth. But smartphones have some benefits too. Students use them in cases of emergency, to contact their parents, to make payments, to follow digital maps. So far, so complicated. And while schools are still dealing with the ifs and buts of phones, they have a new threat: artificial intelligence. While the adults learn how to share their screens on Zoom, 19% teens, 19% teenagers use ChatGPT to do their homework. 20% use it to write essays and 69% use it to do research. This may worry you, but this is not even the worst part, because students are also using AI to cheat in exams. They're generating human-sounding reports, cloning voices, and making sexual deepfakes of their classmates. Again, schools do not know what to do. At worst, they have made wrong moves, like this high school in New Jersey, where administrators announced the names of girls who were subjected to fake images over the school intercom. It's a textbook example of what not to do. In the other extreme, schools try to be over-enthusiastic about adopting technology, so much so that some of them replace teachers with artificial intelligence. Do you see the problem here? Technology is moving much faster than policy. A rapid shift is underway, and no one gets it completely, because the speed at which technologies are reaching the market has far outpaced our evaluation of this tech. It's not properly tested, but it's widely available. Having said that, we are not totally helpless. We can implement better privacy protections, have better evaluations, create updated curriculum, and spread more awareness among teachers, parents, and students. Sure, this is all new and scary, but this is not the first time education has been affected by rapid change. For decades, we have taught the young how to deal with things that can harm them and others. We teach them how to drive safely. We talk to them about drug abuse, about smoking and alcohol. Now, all we need is the digital equivalent of warning labels, seat belts, and speed limits, because technology is here to stay. So about time we get with the program and call for a hard reset on how we approach tech in schools.
had hijacked IC-814. Well, joining him was former Union Minister and BJP leader Rajiv Chandrasekhar.
I vividly remember IC-814. I was very aware of that accident and very involved in following that. Every man and woman in India and indeed in South Asia knows that hijack of IC-814 from Kathmandu was committed, that act was committed by Pakistan's ISI-backed terrorists. Now, nobody thinks that there were some people from India who did the hijacking. So how the people have Hindu names in that movie, I don't know. But I'm very, very happy that the INV Ministry and the Government of India has taken cognizance of this and has summoned Netflix.
Well, there was stiff opposition and criticism to the depiction of these terrorists in a softer light and humanizing them as well. The series is adapted from the book Flight into Fear, the Captain's Story, that has been written by journalists Srinjoy Chaudhary and Devi Sharan, the captain of the hijacked flight. This series stars Pankaj Kapoor, Manoj Pava, Arvind Swamy, Anupam Tripathi, Diya Mirza, Patra Lekha, Amrita Puri, Divyanu Bhattacharya and Kumud Mishra in key and very significant roles. Amid the growing controversy, the government has taken note of this public outcry. The Ministry of Information and Broadcasting has now summoned Monica Shergill.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. The Indian Air Force carries out relief operations in the flooded cities of Andhra Pradesh. French police face off with migrants trying to cross the English Channel. And South African scientists unveil fragments of a motorcycle-sized meteorite. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1998, Google was founded by Larry Page and Sergey Brin. The brand is now synonymous with the internet. Google handles 70% of global online searches. It has since diversified into email, software and mobile phones. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Hello and welcome to Brass Tacks. I'm Zaka Jacob. We're coming to you live from the CNN News 18 studios. The Himachal Pradesh government is neck deep in debt. It is so loaded in debt that it is not able to pay more than 2 lakh state government employees their salary for the month of September. The state is more than 87,000 crores in debt. So much so, the Chief Minister Sukhwinder Sukhu and other ministers in his government have decided to forego 2 months of their